นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนัมมัสสามิ Blessings, good evening. As we know, when we meditate, one of the most frustrating things is the wandering mind that doesn't do what we want it to do. If we are meditating on the breath, trying to keep attention on the breath and the mind keeps wandering away, then we very easily get annoyed or disappointed. One of the hardest moods to deal with when you meditate is anxiety, worry about things in the future that are coming up, or restlessness, agitation based on things that have happened in the past, that unresolved business or issues that are still coming up in the mind. So restlessness, anxiety takes the mind away from the breath very easily, and it has a certain relentlessness to it. Thoughts that you've had before just come up over and over again. Repetitive, often very tiresome, but seemingly uncontrollable. Luang Por Chah used to say, well, if you're caught into that, a good remedy, or at least a temporary remedy, is to hold your breath. Just stop breathing, like when you're underwater. And very quickly the desire to breathe, to live, will come and bring your attention back to the present moment, to the breath, with the thought, when am I going to breathe again? And it'll cut through that anxiety, if only for a short while. And if you're mindful at that moment, you can teach yourself. You say, well, this anxiety is not so important. More important is when am I going to start breathing again? It may help you to have a new way of looking at your anxiety and realize it is just a condition of mind. Often it's just habitual thinking based on previous habitual thinking, based on previous habitual thinking. And builds up a kind of momentum like a train or a big ship, and it's difficult to stop. If you hold your breath, you come right back to the most important thing in life, which is life itself. The desire to breathe, the desire to live. And so anxiety, however important it may seem in your mind, becomes relegated to second place. It's just the desire to breathe takes over. So sometimes it can serve to completely let go of the anxiety in that moment, or at least give you a better perspective on it. As you start to breathe again, if the anxiety returns, you know it's just a temporary state of mind. The Buddha also encouraged us to use the reflection on death, the recollection of death, in the same way, to cut through the endless mental proliferation that we're subject to, that most of the time we hardly even notice, but when we come to meditate, then it becomes very clear. As you're battling with your mind, trying to come back to the breath, and the mind is just determined to think about something or other, the Buddha said, recollect death. Everything is impermanent, because when I die, I separate from everything I love and like, which is the cause of all that anxiety. And sometimes when you recollect death, it's just thinking through a theme. We call it a discursive meditation. Keeping your mind on that theme and just thinking it through. What does death mean? What is death? Well, literally, it's the end of your breathing. You stop breathing when you die. The body, therefore, stops working. But in the bigger picture, what does it mean? Well, it means you separate from everything. People, family, friends, strangers, enemies, people you know, people you don't know. You separate from all of them. You separate from your possessions, your home, your car, your money, your property, whatever it is that is your favorite possession, you separate from that. You separate from all your plans, don't you, about the future. So sometimes to help this recollection or this contemplation on a theme, you might bring up the idea, if I was to die tomorrow, or if I got the news tomorrow that I have terminal illness and only a short time to live, what does it mean? All your plans suddenly don't matter anymore. And all your worries, your anxieties don't matter so much. You may still have some, but they change, don't they? A lot of them drop away, or a lot of them become less important because you realize there's nothing you can do anyway if you were going to die. Also, a lot of very petty or mundane thoughts and concerns of the mind drop away. It doesn't matter what kind of clothes you're going to wear tomorrow, what you're going to eat if you're about to die. So since the time of the Buddha, meditators have used the recollection of death to cut through a lot of the mental proliferation that we experience all the time. Bring the mind to the present moment and help us prioritize things. The Buddha himself asked the monks sometimes, if you're going to die, what's important? The important thing is to bring the path of practice that the Buddha taught to fruition, to realize the Four Noble Truths. Suffering is to be realized and known, the cause of suffering is to be abandoned, the cessation of suffering is to be experienced, and the path leading to the cessation of suffering is to be cultivated, developed. That's the most important thing. If your time is limited, that's what you should focus on. This is how the monks would answer in one way or another. Do more good, improve this mind, improve this practice, because death is coming. So the Buddha said if you reflect on death often, it makes you heedful. And heedfulness is putting attention on what you still have to do in cultivating this path for the end of suffering. Unfinished business, what you still need to complete. And in the same way, when we forget death, we become heedless. And we tend to waste a lot of time in life on trivial things or foolish things, and quite often on harmful things. So the recollection of death is both a way to bring up mindfulness and cut through all kinds of trains of thought and worries and mental states. It's also a way to bring up wisdom, understanding more clearly what's important in life and life itself, the fact that it's impermanent and we're not going to be here forever. So when we recollect death, it brings up this quality we call samvega, which is sometimes translated as urgency of practice, urgency of mind. I need to practice, and becomes a priority because time is running out. When you recollect death, you see that. So you feel that sense of the importance of practice, doing more good on every level, whether it's making merit through dana or cultivating virtuous qualities, forgiving those that we're angry with, letting go of anger and ill will, cultivating mindfulness, and then cultivating wisdom, insight. One gains a certain urgency. The other way they talk about it, samvega, is sobering up, recognizing the truth, where before we had forgotten it or were deluded by other things, so we forget the truth or don't see the truth. It's like sobering up. When the Buddha gave a teaching like this, he said, monks reflect on death often. That's coming from a place of compassion and wisdom, giving a teaching on something that's very valuable. Maybe at first it doesn't seem like that. To recollect death or be reminded of death, it's sad. But that's just the way it is, isn't it? When you sober up, you wake up to the truth of things, you realize that life has a certain sadness to it. It doesn't mean there's no pleasure or happiness to be had in life. But because all of that is temporary, there's a sadness. The best things that the world has to offer are still temporary. Whether it's the love or the happiness of a family or a relationship, friendship, the pleasures of having wealth, being able to go here and there, do things, buy things, have all kinds of experiences, pleasant states of mind, things we enjoy, feelings of happiness, pleasure in the mind. In the light of reflecting on death, it's all seen as impermanent. None of it lasts. So it sobers you up and also brings this sort of sadness, but then that leads on to the urgency, the wish to pursue the Dhamma, practice the Dhamma, to free the mind from attachment, free the mind from fear. When you hold your breath, why is it that you stop thinking about all the other things that are constantly distracting you? It's because you're afraid. And that fear comes from attachment. Attachment to this body as me, mine, myself. And then attachment to all these other things. People, possessions, different kinds of pleasure and happiness. The fear of separation of all that comes up when we reflect on death. So it's a very powerful teaching. And the Buddha also pointed out, you don't really need to look for it. It's there in our experience all the time anyway. Every day we hear about people in the world dying from illness or old age or accidents, whatever, many causes of death. And even in our own circle of family, friends, there's probably somebody, sooner or later, somebody you know will die. Or there's the threat of death from illness and accident. You don't need to look very far, and that truth already comes up into your consciousness. Maybe you've had an experience where you lost somebody already in your life, and you can remember that. But when you meditate on the theme of death, you're bringing that perception up very clearly into the present moment. And then you realize that actually death, one of the things that make us afraid of death is just the perception of it, the word itself and the concept of this separation or ending. We attach to it with fear, with aversion. It's something we don't even want to think about, talk about. But if you look at it in another way, it's just a natural part of human existence, is that things arise and cease all the time. They're born and die all the time. So if you are watching the breath and then you hold your breath, you want to breathe again because you want to live. But at the same time, it's making you clear that breath in, breath out, that's the nature of life, and life is really paired with death. So you have breathing in and breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. Arising and ceasing of the breath. It's just normal, it's just natural. In the same way we have our sense consciousness. In one moment seeing, one moment hearing, one moment tasting, touching, thinking or remembering. Rising and cessation is just normal part of existence. It's just we don't notice it, we're not mindful of it. We have one thought, and that thought dies, and then another thought comes into the mind. So actually birth and death is taking place all the time, whether we realize it or not. So it's not that distant from us, it's not anything far away. It's just we don't think of it, we don't notice it. Partly it's because we are afraid of it. We don't like to lose what we're attached to and what we identify with and what we want. We want pleasure, so if we're enjoying something we don't like the end of that. But actually the ending of pleasure is just as normal as the beginning of pleasure or the arising of pain or the ending of pain. Your life is bound up with this constant arising and ceasing of experience. And you don't have to do anything special, but just notice it. And then you're starting to see that separation from what we like is normal, and then you're united with what you like, and then you're separated from it again. And this is the birth and death of the mind and of experience, which is going on all the time. You don't have to wait for the very last day of your life, whenever that may be, to understand this if you become mindful and pay attention to the nature of things. And it's actually liberating to see the way things are, isn't it? If you can see that it is normal for things to arise and cease into your consciousness, into your experience, then you become more used to it, more familiar with it. Then you can accept it. So this is why why the Buddha pointed out in the hierarchy of karma, one of the most powerful kinds of karma, good karma, is insight into impermanent, the impermanent nature of body, mind, feelings, perceptions, thought formations, sense consciousness. Because it liberates your mind from delusion, it wakes you up to the truth. And that's peaceful. It stops the anxiety, the worry, it stops the ignorance that creates more clinging, which leads to more suffering. So they say, Ajahn Chah used to say, one who sees impermanence sees the Buddha. One who sees the Dhamma sees the Buddha, one who sees the Buddha sees the Dhamma, sees impermanence. But that seeing or that knowing of impermanence has to come through our own examination of the truth. It's not something you can just believe in, or it's not just a theory to accept, it's something you observe and witness through your own experience every day. And you don't even need to meditate to notice it, do you? Just notice your changing thoughts and moods, changing mental landscape through your day, and you can see it, see impermanence happening. And it's like seeing death happening, arising and ceasing of different thoughts and feelings. Changes in your body. I remember one time I was walking meditation at Wat Marpjan. It was in the jungle up my kuti, and it's a long time ago now, maybe 30 years ago. I was just walking back and forth. When I walk meditation, usually I put attention on my feet and recite the word Buddha. It just keeps your mind in the present moment, walking back and forth, Buddha, Buddha, Buddha. And if you keep doing it, that day I think I'd walk for about an hour, you can become very calm, peaceful, because your attention is turned inwards to the body, the mind in the present moment. So it's like all your mental energy gathers together and you feel very relaxed, calm. So I was walking back and forth like that, feeling calm, and there was nothing particularly bothering me. I didn't have any particular anxiety or strong attachment coming up, so the mind was quite concentrated and calm. Then I heard a sound behind me, very soft sound, as I was walking. I was walking quite slowly, and the sound got a little bit louder and a little bit closer, so I stopped and I just turned and looked to my left, and this huge king cobra came out of the forest and just gliding in its own way, quite gracefully or beautifully, they glide along the ground. You hardly see any movement in them. There's a little bit of movement in the muscle so that they can move, but you don't really see that. It seems to be just like floating or gliding along the ground. It come right up behind me, so I just stopped, and as I turned I could see the snake. Its head had reached my feet. It was like just a few inches from my bare feet. And it was huge, like very thick and very long, many meters long. And the king cobra is a snake that has very powerful venom that can, if it bites you, then it paralyzes you, you can die because you can't breathe anymore. It paralyzes the lungs. So they're deadly snakes, and they can be quite aggressive. But by then it was right next to me, literally a few inches from me, so I just had to stop, and I just contemplated. There's nothing I can do, because I knew I'd lived with king cobras already for quite a few years. I knew what they were like, what they were capable of. So I just had to wait and see what it was going to do. I was peaceful, so I didn't do anything to annoy it or threaten it. I just watched it, waited. And the snake, as it got to my feet, it just turned and looked at me. It lifted its head off the ground a little bit, so I could see its hood. That's why I knew it was a cobra. It seemed to be like checking to see if I was going to do anything. And I was thinking, no, I'm not going to do anything. I'll just wait. So it put its head down again and just glided on. It seemed like ages because it was so long and so big. And it just glided off into the forest. But at that time I was thinking, if this bites me, I'll probably die for sure. And nobody will know because I'm here in the forest at my kuti, and it might be many hours before someone misses me. And I was thinking, well, if I die now, what does that mean? Well, it means somebody will have to tell my family in England. Well, they haven't seen me for a while, they're used to that, so it's not the end of the world. They just have to accept I'm not coming home. Then I thought, if I die, did I leave a mess in my hut? Will someone have to come and clear up my hut? And I thought, well, I don't have a lot of possessions. It won't take very long. Then I thought, well, what does death mean? If it was to bite me and I die right here, right now, what does it mean? Well, it means I lose my chance to carry on practicing the Dhamma. I haven't finished the practice, I'm not enlightened, so there's still more I want to do. I haven't done everything that the Buddha taught, I haven't realized everything that the Buddha taught, and I'm a monk, so that's why I'm here, that's what I've dedicated my life to. So I thought that would be a shame. And I thought about how in Thailand, they say your merit, part of your merit, meaning your good karma, your accumulated virtues and good karma, is how long you get to live, so how long you get to practice the Dhamma. So I thought, oh well, we'll just have to see how much merit I've got. Luckily I still had some merit, and the snake just went on and disappeared. I didn't bother him, he didn't bother me, or her, I'm not sure what gender it was. But the recollection of death brings you right back to, well, what's important in life? What do you still have to develop? What good do you still have to do? And what's not important? Half of what we're thinking about is really not that important, is it? When you bring up the recollection of death, it brings you to the present moment. Number one important thing is just your state of mind. If you have any kind of distraction or confusion, it's to be abandoned. Any particular attachment, greed or desire is to be abandoned. Any anger, ill will or hatred towards somebody, or self-hatred to be abandoned. Unwholesome mental states are to be abandoned, and wholesome ones to be brought up right there, right in the present moment. And when you recollect death, that's bringing you to see the importance of that, just your state of mind. You might even ask yourself, if I was to die now, what do I want in my mind at this moment as I die? Do I want to be full of fear, or worry, or confusion, or anger, or lust? Whatever it is, do you really want that in your mind when you die? You probably answer no, so then can I abandon it, let it go, and just find peace in the present moment? This is one reason why the Buddha encouraged us to recollect death. It's because it brings your mind to the present moment, helps you to let go. So it's actually a teaching of compassion, even though we tend to associate it with fear, gloom, depression, the thought of the end of your life. But if used skillfully, it's coming from a place of compassion, helping you to get your life together, get your mind together, and see what is important and what's not important. So it could be a useful way to improve things. It improves maybe relations with other people because you realize who's helped you and who's important. It helps you to appreciate the good that others have done for you, or the good others are doing in the world. It helps you to resolve ill will and hatred because you don't want that left in your mind when you die. So you're willing to forgive, let go. A recollection of death, they call it Marananusati, mindfulness of death. It's actually a good friend. It's helpful to us, even though it sounds something that's brings up fear or aversion. There's a teacher, Ajahn Kalyano, used to talk about quite often, lift up as a good example of a practitioner who became enlightened in the city. His name was Ajahn Kalyano. Ajahn Kalyano Dhammavitiko. He's a monk who lived at Wat Thepsa in Bangkok. Died many years ago now, maybe 40 years ago, even 50 years ago. 50 years ago over. But still, he practiced meditation living in a busy city temple and became enlightened there. And he, early on in his life as a monk, he made his bed out of a coffin. He got a coffin, put it in his room, and he would sleep in it every night. And people asked him, they said, "Why do you sleep in a coffin?" He said, "Well, it reminds me of death." And they said, "Well, isn't that gloomy?" He'd say, "No. Death has only brought me good things. The recollection of death has only brought me wisdom and understanding and mindfulness and peace. Because when your mind accepts the impermanent nature of things, then it's peaceful." So he said he has no problems with death. He's friendly with death. He used to sleep in a coffin every night. You notice when you're not accepting the truth, your mind runs away from death. It's afraid, it doesn't want to think about it, it doesn't want to contemplate the end of things, it just wants more pleasure, more of what it's attached to. Then we suffer more. The further away we get from understanding death or accepting death, the more we suffer. The more we identify with that which is impermanent when we don't see death. We identify with the body, so we have more fear. Fear of illness, fear of any kind of danger. When we come to the practice, we cultivate generosity and compassion and virtuous behavior and mindfulness and insight. It's the opposite. This is what we call merit or good karma. This brings up a sense of peace in the mind, goodness, happiness in the mind, and then the fear of death subsides. They say one with merit in their heart is not afraid of death. They can die peacefully without fear. So maybe I'll leave you with those reflections tonight.